5.
They're losing votes left and right, aren't they? So any policy they announce, it's going to be unpopular.
4.
We're all normal people. We are all concerned about hordes of young men from where we don't know, who perhaps have been brought up in cultures that do not respect women.
3.
Starmer showed that he simply doesn't understand British politics, and the people around him, I'm afraid, don't really get it either.
2.
I think May 2026 will be one of the most memorable dates in modern British history.
1. We have liftoff.
Welcome once again to Planet Normal, the Telegraph podcast with Allison Pearson.
Hello.
And me, Liam Halligan. The Labour faithful have gathered in Liverpool on the wonderful River Mersey. But for Starmer's bunch, the river of choice seems to be denial. Denial when it comes to the government's ghastly poll ratings. Denial about the scale of economic challenges facing Britain. Denial, I hope you're getting this feeble joke, denial as in the river in Egypt. Denial when it comes to acknowledging that unless the government faces down its ranks of left-wing MPs and gets public spending under control, then Labour will drive the economy off the cliff, sparking a 1976-style fiscal meltdown. Yes, dear citizens of Planet Normal, our warnings that the bond vigilantes were coming for Starmer, initially derided by a government, pretty much an entire political and media class in denial, are now very much part of the national debate, and not a moment too soon. You've been writing, dear co-pilot, about Starmer's plan for ID cards and how Labour's losing votes to the left, with Starmer's flag waving and talk of tougher immigration controls. He's meanwhile calling reforms policies racist, but doesn't that make the reform supporters he's trying to win back racist too? Is this Starmer's Clinton-style basket of deplorables moment? Link to your latest oeuvre in the show notes to this episode. My Sunday column, meanwhile, warned that we wouldn't get economic growth unless we boost productivity or output per hour worked. My Sunday column, meanwhile, warned that we won't get economic growth until we boost productivity or output per hour worked. And we should start with a state that now employs at massive expense 34% more civil servants than in 2017. Why, Allison? Why?
I think while you're doing your lame denial jokes, co-pilot, now was it Sid James or Kenneth Williams with the infamy, they've all got it in for me, which could be...
Was that Carry On Up the Khyber?
I think it probably was. Talking of which... We should tell Planet Normal listeners that, look, most Planet Normal listeners would go a very long way to avoid a Keir Starmer Labour conference speech. But how far have you gone?
Well, I'm in, Allison, Planet Normal's Uzbek bureau. I'm in Tashkent, which is the capital of Uzbekistan, which I think most people can't put on a map. It's actually a very, very beautiful country in Central Asia. It's Central Asia's most populous country. It's got about 38 odd million people. I'm here because I'm on a train tour of Central Asia with my daughter, Ailish, who is very interested in this part of the world. So we're spending a bit of time together. But by the wonders of modern technology, we're able to bring you Planet Normal via the train's Wi-Fi system. So I'm literally sitting in a cabin, in a carriage, on a siding at the train station in Tashkent in Uzbekistan, one of the capital cities of the Silk Road. And in the next few days, I'll be going on to Bukhara, Samarkand. I'll be going to Tajikistan, Dushanbe. It's a really interesting part of the world. I've traveled here a bit in the past, and I'm glad to be here now. But glad also, Allison, to be talking to you and Planet Normal listeners.
Yeah, I think we probably slightly over here, a slightly less good frame of mind, because we just had, actually just coming to an end today, the Labour Party conference, and there's lots to say, Liam, but it struck me that the big problem of this conference was its total confusion. So it was dominated by someone who isn't even in the Labour Party, which is Nigel Farage. And Farage was called a racist. Keir Starmer kicked off what looked like a coordinated campaign on Sunday morning on the Laura Kuenssberg show by saying that the reform plan to discontinue indefinite leave to remain and to only pay benefits to British citizens, by the way, bringing us in line with almost any other country. But Starmer decided to say that that was immoral and Farage was a racist. So it's really kicked off, Liam. It's extremely unpleasant. I think actually for a serving Prime Minister, one of the most extraordinary, vile, actually really deeply unpleasant things to do. And Nigel has reacted by saying that Starmer and Labour in particular have been essentially inciting violence against him. And furthermore, today, Wednesday, he's revealed that his personal protection was cut very recently by about 75%. And just to add to the fun, we've got the leading historian, David Lammy, who ploughed in saying that Farage in his youth had flirted with the Hitler Youth. And just to point out, first of all, that David Lammy on Mastermind, when asked who succeeded Henry VIII, confidently replied Henry VII. And David Lammy, clearly perhaps not really knowing that Nigel Farage was born in 1964 and the Hitler Youth were disbanded at the end of the Second World War. So Lammy has subsequently issued, I think, a correction with the libel lawyers beating a path to his door. I think Starmer there, Liam, trying to establish this very firm dividing line. We're at a fork in the road, he said, between decency and nice people like me and horrible, divisive people like Nigel Farage and the millions of people who plan to vote for him. And it strikes me, Liam, I'm interested to get your take on it. It strikes me that as a gambit, all these people, all the disenchanted red wallers who've given up on Labour because of its frankly racist, anti-white working class stance, to basically by association call all them immoral and racist, may not be the best plan to win back support. What say you, co-pilot?
Well, I've been monitoring events in Liverpool very, very closely from where I am. There is actually pretty good Wi-Fi on this train, and I'm a bit of a news junkie like you. And from where I'm sitting, I think Starmer has just made such a cataclysmic political error here.
Hugely.
Above and beyond the insane name calling of Farage in a way that could easily incite violence. That's the trouble here. In the aftermath of ghastly events in America, to throw around name calling in this way as the sitting Prime Minister of the UK is real desperation, I think. It's a bit like Labour always saying election time that the Tories are going to abolish the NHS. No, they're not. No mainstream politician in Britain wants to abolish the NHS, wants to abolish free at the point of use healthcare. It's completely mendacious and it demeans our democracy. It demeans our public life. The UK, all kinds of international surveys have shown over many, many years, particularly the ones by Pew Global Institute, PEW Global Institute, very authoritative attitudes of global opinion. The UK is consistently the least racist, the most tolerant country, certainly in Europe, certainly far more so than Germany, Italy, France, and Spain. The only two countries in the Western world that are more tolerant are Canada and New Zealand, which are, of course, largely, with respect to their indigenous populations, countries created by immigration. Now, of course, with the pace that we've had in recent years, as we've often discussed on Planet Normal, and I think you and I are at one on this, as is increasing numbers of the country, the pace has been too fast. Now, the Overton window has shifted very, very quickly because decent, law-abiding, regular mainstream folk are worried about the pace, are worried about the impact on public services, are worried about the impact on housing, are worried in particular about how many people are arriving illegally when we don't know who they are. And then they are obviously mixing with local communities. And that is a major problem. And it's not racist to say that at all. And I'm not here to defend Nigel Farage for 1 minute. I'm here to give some objective analysis. But, you know, like you, Allison, it is our job. We do knock about with and get to know our leading politicians. It's what journalists do. It doesn't mean we always befriend them or anything like that. We do get to make judgments about their character, and our readers trust us or they don't about what our view of their character is. Nigel Farage has not got a racist bone in his body. Nigel Farage's main right-hand man at the moment in terms of his logistics and his conferences and his kind of diary and so on. And I won't name this guy because, he isn't in public life, if you like. He's very much a production guy, but he has an Indian father and he has an Irish mother and he's gay, right? And him and Nigel, they get on like a house on fire. They are really good mates. This guy left journalism to work with Nigel Farage, as if someone like that is going to work with somebody who is racist. And so Keir Starmer's not only character assassinated somebody, he's also conducted really stupid politics. I do think it is his Hillary Clinton basket of deplorables moment. Reform have got more support in the polls than the Tories and Labour put together. A lot of that support are red wall traditional Labour voters voting for reform or saying they're going to vote for reform because they think Labour is now far too dominated by the Islington tendency, by the university towns, rather than by people who understand ordinary working folk and their values and their concerns and all the rest of it. And Starmer, I think, has just absolutely made sure that Labour is never going to touch reform in the opinion polls again before a general election. It is a blunder of catastrophic proportions, and it's also really nasty. And I think it's safety critical, in fact, and I don't say that lightly, for one of our leading politicians in the form of Nigel Farage.
Absolutely agree. And I think it's always the left that's banging on about toxic rhetoric and inciting hatred, isn't it? But apparently that only works one way. And I did laugh, actually. I mean, these attacks are quite ludicrous. For Keir Starmer to say that Nigel Farage doesn't like Britain. I mean, talk about pot calling the kettle sooty bum. I mean, Starmer is the creature of international courts and
the bloke who prefers Davos over Westminster, the bloke that tried to reverse the biggest referendum in this country's history before it had even been implemented.
And Nigel, who spent 30 years actually trying to preserve British sovereignty. Look, it is absolutely ludicrous, but it also led to these sort of hilarious trying to do the split. On the Sunday, Starmer's attacking this policy of scrapping the indefinite right to remain. And then 24 hours later, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, is basically up on stage at the conference announcing a policy which sounds not at all dissimilar to the racist and immoral policy, which has just been damned by the leader. They really are in between a rock and a hard place, Liam, aren't they, really? Because they're losing votes left and right, aren't they? So any policy they announce is either going to be unpopular with the left or the right. And it was very noticeable listening to the various conference speeches that at a certain point they'd try to say to the conference, look, we're going to have to do some things you don't like. Now, that doesn't fill me with confidence, does it? It doesn't sound like a party that's united around these hard choices or the hard road ahead. It sounds like, that the ministers are going to be fighting tooth and nail with their rank and file. So even though it has to be said, Starmer's speech got an absolutely rapturous reception in the conference hall, I completely agree with you and think it will only cause more dislike. It's quite hard to see how Keir Starmer could be more disliked because according to a Survation poll on Sunday, Starmer is the least popular Prime Minister in British history. He is at -60 and declining. And this is also very interesting because to try and take on Reform and Farage over patriotism is a real kamikaze mission, isn't it? So they were calling Nigel and Reformers plastic patriots. And we had the spectacle of Yvette Cooper and the entire cabinet waving these absurd nylon flags. These are the people normally to be seen carrying refugees welcome placards, but suddenly they've got a sort of mass order from Woolworths of patriotic symbols. And this same Survation poll found that Labour is believed by the public to be the least patriotic party, even behind the Greens, who would sell East Anglia to the Dutch if they felt it could bring down our carbon emissions. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely ludicrous. They've been calling patriotic people flag shaggers and bigots, haven't they, for as long as we can remember. But there's been a Damascene conversion, which I strongly suspect you're right, Liam, and it won't have convinced many people at all. And I suspect, I mean, we're recording on Wednesday, I think this incitement to violence against Farage, I think that's going to bubble on. And Starmer called him the enemy. We must fight the enemy, right? This is not the language of a statesman, is it?
It's hardly Voltaire, is it? You know, crikey.
No, I mean,
It's absolutely outrageous.
it was really, really outrageous. And it provoked Nigel to say that we're going to teach Starmer a lesson next May that British history will never forget. And of course, he was alluding to the thing that your co-pilot keeps banging on about, but which I think May 2026 will be one of the most memorable dates in modern British history, because we will then see not just some local elections, but the devolved parliament elections. And if the polls are correct, we will see the century-old reign of Welsh Labour toppled. So I think that although some people said that that speech this week was Starmer's best conference speech, I will suggest it was his last Labour conference speech as Prime Minister.
But that verdict was from hacks doing vox pops in the hall, and Starmer showed that he simply doesn't understand British politics, and the people around him, I'm afraid, don't really get it either, because the conference speech is 101. It's the time when you have uninterrupted access to the airwaves, right? It's almost as if, you know, the BBC is contracted to put you on air for the length of your speech.
Yes.
You shouldn't be talking to people in the room. You shouldn't be talking to your activists. You should be talking to people at home who maybe will tune into politics once or twice a year to see what they think. And what Starmer did is he gave a deeply indulgent speech to try and mollify his activist base, because, of course, he's facing a very significant challenge, a completely open and brazen challenge from Andy Burnham, the Manchester mayor. And yet Starmer should have stood his ground and spoken to people at home and given a message that showed that Labour gets it when it comes to, you know, those Middle England voters, if you like, that he needs to win back. Try and convince people he can actually manage the economy. Farage and Reform, they have got problems. Obviously, they're on a roll in terms of the opinion polls, but they have got issues. You know, I do think there is a split at the top of Reform about whether they should be a big state or a small state party. And I say that advisedly. And I talk to these people all the time. And Starmer could have exploited that the way Kemi Badenoch has tried to start exploiting it. I think she needs to do more there. We are standing up for reality. We are standing up for fiscal prudence. That is what people need to hear at the moment. That's what the silent majority of voters need to hear, because there's a lot of fear out there that the political class is, as I said at the top, going to drive the economy over a cliff. Of course, this is a wide constituency that's worried about the future of the economy. It's a wide, almost silent constituency that worries that bringing in 1970s style trade union laws means there aren't going to be as many jobs around. That is what a lot of people think. And Starmer could have appealed to those people and taken on Reform on their own ground, if you like. But instead, it was student politics. The UK economy does not need student politics at the moment. International investors who are looking at our financial markets and wondering how much they're going to charge the UK government, which is now borrowing 10, 15, 20 billion quid a month, they are not impressed by this parlour games at the top of the Labour Party at a time when we really need grown-ups in the room to do what needs to be done, to tell the electorate tough truths in the way, with respect to him, Dennis Healey did. I've been reading lots about Dennis Healey, somebody who I was privileged to know. I used to speak to him a lot when I first came into political journalism. Of course, I'm talking about the Labour Chancellor of the mid-1970s, the Labour Chancellor who was in office when we went cap in hand to the International Monetary Fund. But he tried really hard to swing party conference. He went to party conference and he told home truths, and it wasn't popular, but at least he began that process. Labour are just tiptoeing around these difficult issues while waving flags. They must think ordinary people are completely stupid. And Rachel Reeves, of course, gave a speech in which, again, all she could do really was hand out baubles to the Labour left, saying, oh, yeah, of course, we're going to strap the two-child benefit cap. Just moving the two-child benefit cap to a three-child benefit cap. That's 2.5 to 3 billion quid a year. That's a lot of money. And so I was really disappointed by this conference. I approach these things with an open mind. I genuinely want Labour to do a decent job, because we need a Labour Party that is competent, that can not wreck the economy. That's what we had under Tony Blair, and I think the country was better for it. Not that I agree with a lot of what Blair did, but at least he showed a Labour Party can make a decent fist of it. Starmer's taking us straight back to the 70s. He's taken us back literally to the politics of his youth.
Yeah, but Liam, breakfast clubs. A library in each school, breakfast clubs. It was actually, when they were listing their achievements of the last 14 months, it was quite slim pickings, wasn't it? I mean, that breakfast clubs thing really gets my goat. I mean, if there was any money going spare for children, we should be looking at COVID catch-up and maybe sports facilities or music lessons, something that actually might add value, not shoving loads of carbohydrate down their throats. But let's pause for a minute, I think, Liam, to salute the absolutely preternatural ability of Keir Starmer to unite the nation against him and any policy he comes up with. So while you've been away, we've had the compulsory digital ID. Now, Planet Normal listeners might remember that when Sir Keir, when he came to Downing Street, in his first speech, he promised to tread more lightly on your lives, apart from selling all your information to the Chinese and not letting you drive anywhere and making you eat insects, or we'll cut off your phone and your bank account. So it was very funny. I was saying to Cass, our producer, that while you were away, when he denounced the compulsory digital ID, it was just incredible to see the unanimity across the political spectrum, because at the same time, you had Jeremy Corbyn on the far left and Rupert Lowe on the robust right, both saying what an absolutely catastrophic idea that was. And comically, Starmer was claiming that the digital ID would help to control illegal migration, because as we know, Liam, all those Albanian drug lords operating out of green lanes in Tottenham, they're always going to be saying, oh, let's see your digital ID, Abdul, before I give you a big job in my drug running organisation. So absolutely fatuous, and not just fatuous, but actually extremely worrying, given the state of free speech in our country. The idea that the state would have ever more powers to pry into our personal information is pretty chilling, isn't it?
It is indeed. And I wonder what the Tories are going to get up to at their conference next week. I do think Kemi Badenoch got an opportunity here. I do think she should really robustly call out Keir Starmer's name calling, big time. I think she is uniquely qualified to do that, not only because she's a black woman, but also because, she has genuinely experienced what it's like to come to the UK and to make good. And she can talk from experience and with great authority. I also think the Tories have got a really good chance when it comes to fiscal responsibility. In recent months, rather too cautiously at first, I think, but now a lot less cautiously, the Tories are saying what we've been saying for a long time. Look, if you continue to go down this road, you are going to cause a fiscal crisis. I started writing that the best part of a year ago. I wrote that actually before Labour came to power, saying Liz Truss, the spectre of Liz Truss will haunt this Labour government, when a lot of people were saying, well, we've got the grown-ups back in the room, and various corporate politicians who think they're actual business people and entrepreneurs. They're not. They're just corporate politicians saying, oh, is it great? We've got a wonderful Labour government now. They're not saying it anymore, are they? They're absolutely hopping mad. We have got a problem when it comes to fiscal policy, and Kemi Badenoch and Mel Stride and Andrew Griffith, I do think she's got a decent shadow chancellor now and a decent business secretary. They're both financially literate people. She is financially literate. She's an engineer. She can add up, and she's got people around her who are pretty financially literate. She's got to make hay. I think it was wrong for the Tories. They didn't oppose properly when Labour rebels took out the government on welfare reform. They were worried about being seen to be against more public spending. Wrong. I think they've now changed their tune. They're saying that if Labour wants to do proper welfare reform, they know there'll be lots of Labour rebels against that, but the Tories will be whipped to support Labour's welfare reforms. That's the current position of the Tory front bench. The trouble is, so few people know that. You've got to be a real kind of student of where the Tory party is to even know that. She's got to cut through with that message of fiscal responsibility. She has to do that next week, and I sincerely hope she does.
Also, with lifting the 2-child benefit cap, Nigel Farage
Indeed.
had made sort of encouraging noises about that, although then rowing back a bit and saying only British citizens. But I think that's another thing where what would speak very strongly, not just to right of centre people, but I think across the past really, is addressing this sense of unfairness that many couples are. In fact, Liam, more and more couples I know restricted themselves to 1 child, never mind 2, because of the cost of living. So I think that could be a very strong suit for the Conservatives to say responsibility, rewarding people who've made the sensible choice for their families, not just people who fecklessly produce loads of children and expect the state to fork out. And I think another opportunity actually for the Tories is net zero, which Kemi's already been pretty robust about.
Sharon Graham, obviously, who runs the TUC, she's now openly calling for Ed Miliband to be sacked.
Well,
and rightly so, because he is costing jobs. His net zero mania is costing jobs. We are losing jobs left, right, and centre across the car industry, across manufacturing, in our refineries. Ineos has closed down Grangemouth, which is Scotland's biggest refinery. Other refineries are closing down. These are decent jobs that pay well in parts of the country where there aren't, with respect, many well-paying jobs.
Well, I think Claire Coutinho, who's done well for the Conservatives, I think she can
doing a decent job.
I think she can get up and say, where's the £300 cut in our energy bills we're having then, Ed? Because all we're seeing now is the energy price cap going up. And I know, Liam, that, I live with a stern invigilator of the thermostat, like lots of women. I live with a man
him indoors,
24?
18 is plenty.
18 is plenty. I ain't edging it up. But I think it's going to be...
Put a hat on.
I think put a hat on, put a jumper on. But, we're laughing. But I think for a lot of families, it's going to be a big issue this winter. We are
totally.
Even over the summer, people were getting energy bills where they simply couldn't believe when they hadn't had the heating on. So God knows what it's going to be like when we actually have to switch the thing on. So I think cost of living, we've talked, haven't we, about the absolutely astounding. We've had lots of emails actually from Planet Normal listeners. I think let's challenge Planet Normal listeners. Let's have a little competition, Liam. Can you send in the biggest food price increase of the week? Because I really think now we're getting some absolutely like 300% increases
Belters.
and that. I mean, you know more about this than I do, but that can be traced back to energy, can't it?
It absolutely can be. Energy is in everything, from the processing of the food to the transporting of the food to the heating and lighting and refrigeration of where the food is sold. And you've got Ed Miliband now tweeting to Labour's, again, Islington tendency. The opponents of clean energy and climate action will put at risk hundreds of thousands of jobs across the country. We will never let that happen. That is absolute tosh, Allison. This sort of green jobs over the rainbow tosh. It's just nonsense. Yes, there are some green jobs, but they're just replacing non-green jobs, and they're not as well paid, and there are far, far fewer of them. Talk to people in the GMB. Talk to Gary Smith, who runs the third biggest union in this country, the GMB. Have got loads of offshore workers, loads of people working in our energy complex. Talk to shop stewards, car plants across the country that face being closed down when mad Ed Miliband brings forward even sooner the ban on new petrol and diesel cars, therefore basically giving our entire car market to Chinese EV manufacturers who are making EVs massively subsidized by the Chinese government precisely to take out Western car industries. It's completely mad. And someone has to call it out. And until very recently, if you called it out...
Climate change denier.
Yeah, if you called it out, you're a climate denier. What a ghastly phrase to elide having a discussion about the physics and economics of using less carbon and cleaner energy with the Holocaust. It's absolutely disgusting. Again, the left using language in order to try and close down debate, because so many of their policies are just nuts.
Now, this week we have a break with Planet Normal tradition. Not one stowaway on the rocket, but several. I went along this morning to the Pink Ladies protest in Westminster. Now, the Pink Ladies are a group of women, mums, grandmothers, sisters, aunts, daughters, who have formed a network to take a stand against the impact of illegal migrant hotels on the safety of women and girls in communities up and down the country, not just in migrant hotels, but of course out in homes of multiple occupancy as well. And it was a cracking event, Liam. We had two rival protests. We had the Pink Ladies on one side of Whitehall and we had Stand Up to Racism on the other side. And I think
Stand up to cardigans.
Stand up to cardigans. I think the Pink Ladies were made of sterner stuff, and the vibe was somewhere between a kind of East End pub and a very, very jubilant hen night. Anyway, among the several women I spoke to was Susan Hall, who I admire hugely, and Susan is the leader of the Conservative group in the London Assembly and a notable opponent of little Sadiq Khan. So I began by asking Susan Hall, why had she come along to the Pink Ladies protest and why did she think it mattered?
Because women are concerned about the safety of other women and of their families. And I don't think the government is taking this seriously enough. There are so many undocumented men in the hotels, in the communities where these people live. They are concerned about their children and their grandchildren. These women are not serial demonstrators. Some of them, like me, have hardly ever been on a demonstration ever. But we must look after our own family. And that's what they're all about. You can see none of them are masked up. None of them, are violent. They just worry about their family, and that is why they're here.
We actually had Keir Starmer at the Labour conference yesterday, spraying the racism word around. We've got anti-racist protesters across the road. Is it too easy to describe these women as racist?
Of course it is. That's what it's all about. All through the mayoral contest, that's all Sadiq Khan ever did. He just kept trying to paint me as far right and racist, because that's what the left do. But you know what? They've done it so much now that nobody is taking any notice. Thank God, because to be called a racist is quite abhorrent. But because they're using it all the time now, it just doesn't have the same effect, and they don't know what to do about that.
And in fact, the Ethiopian man who was living in the Bell Hotel in Epping, 8 days after he came ashore across the channel, we know he did sexually assault an adult woman and a 14-year-old girl. So it was wrong to call them bigots.
Well, absolutely right. It's not the worst case scenario. It's actually happened. And this is what is upsetting, quite rightfully, all these mothers and people that are worried for their children. As you can see, we're all normal people. We are all concerned about hordes of young men from where we don't know, who perhaps have been brought up in cultures that do not respect women, and that is why we're all so concerned.
As a senior person in the Conservative Party, what would you want the Tories to do if they were in government about this situation?
Well, I accept unreservedly we should not have let so many people in. We need to stop this as quickly as we can. Saying you'll smash the gangs is fine if you've got a plan. But Keir Starmer has had no plan, and that's obvious to everybody. But putting so many of these young men in a place, I would like there to be detention centres. So the minute they come off the boat, they're putting in a detention centre where they are watched, where they're not allowed out. I mean, we'd have to leave the ECHR, fine, put them in a place where they cannot come out and deport them because they have illegally broken into our country. So therefore, they should not be allowed to stay under any circumstances, any of them.
I'm in a sea of pink. Lots of women up from Epping in Essex, but also from across the country. Annie, where are you from?
Hampstead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I'm quite sheltered from mainly a lot of the problems, but I live in London and I've lived in London for nearly 50 years and it's become a hostile, horrible environment, really unpleasant. And there's reasons for the unpleasantness and we have to clean it up, basically.
And what would you say the reasons for that unpleasantness are?
Reasons for the unpleasantness is that we're not allowed to live in our own country anymore. The country has become a place where it's like a puzzle that's been thrown up in the air and none of the pieces fit anymore. And I just want the pieces to fit again the way they used to. And people need to fit in. That's all. Just fit in.
Do you agree with the Pink Ladies that women and girls are...
Absolutely. Terrified. I don't have a girl child. I have a male child. But if I had a girl child, she would be tethered to me. Tethered to me. This environment is not correct for a young girl. No, it's unpleasant. It's not right. It's not English.
What would you do about the migrant hotels?
Empty them. Put them in a detention center and deport them. They've got no business being here. They've come from France. They've come across waters and they have decided to make a choice to come and park themselves in this country. I want them gone, all of them. All of them.
Also here today is Jess Gill, who brilliantly co-founded the Women's Safety Initiative. Jess, what are you doing at the Pink Ladies protest?
We're here to stand for our safety. Mass immigration is the biggest issue facing women today. You can see that most notably with the grooming gangs, with the Southport stabbing, with the Manchester Arena bombing, and also with the illegal migrants who are impacting the safety of schoolgirls, which is what the Pink Ladies was brought to be about. I've spoken to so many women over the past few months, and including at this protest, who understand that this is the biggest issue. They've had their own personal experiences. I've had my own personal experiences of it. But I've been followed on the street, I've been catcalled, I've been harassed. And the reality is, the elephant in the room is that it is immigration, and that's just the reality of it. And the other side, they don't have any response. Because, honestly, it's just so hard to argue against. Like, I think this is the biggest issue of our time. This is the biggest issue for women, and these fake feminists, they want to claim they're for women's rights. They're not. Otherwise, they'd be on our side.
Do you think it's the cultures that some of these guys are coming from that's a big problem?
Yeah, absolutely. The culture is a massive issue. I mean, what do you expect when you import men from these cultures which hate women, which have a strong prevalence of female genital mutilation, forced marriages, and just general misogyny where women have no rights? They have very limited safety. Femicide is through the roof. Like, what do you expect when they come over here and they're housed in these hotels and it's just men as well? Like, there's no other way to go about it. This is the obvious reason why this is happening. And I think it's such a shame that the establishment has ignored this and didn't see this was going to happen for so long. Just because they arrive in this country doesn't mean they'll just automatically adopt our values.
You've written very well about being out and about in London with a picnic with girlfriends, and then men just approaching you in a way that wouldn't have happened before.
Yeah, so that's the reason why I started the Women's Safety Initiative. Every single time I would go outside in London, something weird would happen. Like, it wouldn't be the most extreme thing most of the time, but there'd be, men staring at me, men catcalling me, men following me. Even when we went to a picnic in Hampstead Heath, which is a relatively nice area of London, we had two men catcallers. We had a man literally sit right next to us, where our picnic blanket was. There was so much space around, but he sat deliberately next to us, stared at us for a whole 15 minutes, and then tried to make small talk. And even kept at it while, we obviously weren't interested in a conversation. And then I was walking back to the bus stop, and this man, he was beeping at me non-stop. It was so embarrassing. And again, I feel like this shouldn't be normalised, but when I've spoken out against it, and I've spoken to my friends, they all had similar experiences.
What would you like to see done about the migrant hotels?
I think they should all be closed, but I also think the illegal migrants should go back. And I also think anyone in this country who does not respect women, who come from these cultures which do not respect women, shouldn't be here, quite frankly, because it's a threat to women's safety.
What we're hearing is the voices of the Pink Ladies responding to a protest across the road just next to Downing Street by Stand Up to Racism. So it's not about racism, this protest?
Nothing about racism. I've worked for a charity for 43 years, over 3 boroughs. And I wouldn't have lasted that long. I've got an OBE from the Queen. She handed it to me. She would never have given me that if she would have thought I was racist. No, I'm not at all racist. I love everybody. But even these guys, they're fighting for what they believe in, okay? I don't hate them for what they believe in. But a lot of these, if you ask them to say, OK, take a couple of them guys home with you tonight, feed them, bath them and keep them there, every single one of them would say, no, thank you.
Yeah,
you know.
So would you like them deported, the guys who are in the migrant hotel?
What I want to find out is how do you process somebody that doesn't have a history? They say, oh, we're going to process them. Yeah, and then once they're processed, we decide whether they're legal and can stay. How do you process somebody, okay, that doesn't have a past, that can tell you they come from any country, that tells you they're a 15 with a full growth? I want to know how the government is going to process these people. I really do, and the history that they've got. Okay, it's not just about the criminal that they've got. If they've got any past. They may have lots of illnesses, and our NHS won't be able to cope with it.
Yeah.
The infrastructure cannot cope with any more. Yeah. And it's my simple way of saying, if you have a boat with 300 supplies and you put 600 on it, it'll sink.
We're joined by Orla Minahan, brilliant spearheader of this campaign, the Epping Ladies. Orla, what are you doing here today with all these amazing women?
Well, at the moment, I'm trying to get a generator to work so that we can do our speeches. But the women are here today because there have been so many protests up and down the country all summer, outside hotels. Nobody's listening. We decided to bring it here to Whitehall, and today the pink protest is the majority of people here are women, simply because many of them have never ever demonstrated or protested before, and we felt that by giving them something that they could come to with other women in the daytime, they'd feel safer, they'd feel it was a safer environment. So that's what we've tried to create today.
You were all called bigots, the women protesting outside the Epping Bell Hotel. But in fact, just recently, we've seen the Ethiopian man who did, in fact, sexually assault a girl, 14-year-old girl, and an adult woman. Did you feel vindicated?
Yes, absolutely. We did feel vindicated. There was a lot of upset about the fact that his sentence was quite short. But my view is, if they will then deport him after his sentence, then that will be worthwhile. To keep him any longer in a UK prison would be, I think, a bitter pill, because of how much it would cost us, and that I just don't think that's on at all. I think that I believe that anybody who's a illegal immigrant who is arrested should be deported, not kept in our systems.
The judge in that case actually commented on this guy and his bad attitudes towards women, not knowing how to behave towards women. Isn't that a more general problem with the migrants coming here?
Absolutely. They come from, many of them from alien cultures. We fought very, very hard for hundreds of years for equal opportunities, and there is no way that women like us are going to tolerate that misogynistic culture coming into the UK. Absolutely not.
Where are we with the Bell Hotel now? How are you close to having some movement there?
I believe the 15th of October is the Supreme Court. We're back in court to get that shut down. It's over 3 days, I believe, and then we should know whether or not they're going to close it or keep it open. My view is if they close it, they need to move those men out of Epping, not into HMOs. But then I believe that that's the case across the country. Why these men should leave these hotels and be put into our community poses a bigger risk, and that does not help the situation at all. You know, put them in secure units or secure accommodation, process their asylum, and if they do not qualify, send them home. End of story.
Now on to our listener emails. Your messages sent to planetnormal@telegraph.co.uk. Please keep them coming. We'll learn so much from you, the citizens of Planet Normal.
I've had a lot of feedback about the impact of immigration on British workers. This is from Dan. Dear Planet Normal, I'm a newly qualified doctor and a Planet Normal listener ever since my first year of university, which was, of course, cut short, due not to the pandemic itself, but the response to it by government. Now I find myself being balloted for strike action for the first time, and I can't bring myself to contribute to more disruption in an already disastrous NHS, says Dan, when so much has already been caused. In parallel, there's something worrying going on which has barely seemed to get a mention in the media or from the British Medical Association. Competition for specialist training places for doctors after they complete their 2 years of house job straight out of medical school have been on the rise for years. But here's the thing, says Dan. In 2024, there were around 25,000 applicants for 13,000 or so jobs. A majority, 15,000 of these, were doctors who trained outside the UK, known as international medical graduates. If they were taken out of the equation, there would actually be a surplus of jobs for UK graduates. But because of this crazy policy, British graduates are being pushed out to unemployment, non-medical jobs. I know of one doctor who's taken up a job at Tesco, or even leaving the country altogether for places like Australia. So we find ourselves in the bizarre situation of importing thousands of doctors from countries where they are more needed, contributing to net migration figures, whilst our own citizens and graduates are forced to look elsewhere. Tell me there's been some loss of common sense along the way. I despair at the prospect of being forced to compete for a job in the country which funded my medical degree and which I have lived in my whole life on an equal basis with someone who has never set foot here. Yours, Dan. Goodness gracious, Liam.
I saw that email in the Planet Normal inbox, and I think it's an absolute belter. This is from Tom. With regards to your comment on foreign nurses taking the place of British nurses, which of course we discussed last week on Planet Normal, didn't we, Allison?
Yeah.
My daughter, says Tom, who qualified several years ago, currently has a nurse of African heritage as her student. She barely speaks English and is unable to write a report, yet she's in her final year with good grades, clearly all on the back of using AI. This doesn't bode well for the future. Regards, Tom. P.S. Love your show. Thank goodness some people in the press still speak sense.
And this is from Alan. Dear Alison, Liam, do the learned economic co-pilots not think this term Boris wave is a bit unfair? If you've just left the EU, lost freedom of movement to coincide with an unprecedented global pandemic, and the OBR and Migration Advisory Committee tell you they will downgrade your economic forecast if you don't make it easier for overseas workers to come here, leading to recession and increased borrowing costs, it's not easy to ignore their advice, as Liz Truss subsequently found. Regards, Alan.
This is from James. Every week your work on Planet Normal becomes more essential, says James. It feels like we're in a ship sinking in an ocean of BS, and we're submerged in a cabin with just our ears above the surface for sustenance. What an image. As a glass half full type, I'm glad you are, James. I find myself facing up to a grim realization. We're in our 60s, and I've always regretted my wife and I were never blessed with children. The state of things now, as we teeter on every imaginable abyss, has made me think we may actually be the lucky ones. How sad. Regards, from James.
And this is from Nigel. Dear Liam and Allison, I've just listened to Rachel Reeves presenting at the Labour conference in Liverpool. And, not that I agree with much of what she said, it was a credible speech. If you conveniently ignored all the damaging policies and spending the government have done and are planning to do. However, says Nigel, the point of my email is to revisit more generally what have the Labour government done that is actually benefiting us. I've seen a few commentators ask this over the past few months, and the typical response is related to the NHS, increasing public sector pay, not sure they are justified without reforms, and yes, here we are, Liam, free breakfast clubs. Go Pilot Pearson's bête noire. Not sure why we need free breakfast clubs, you and me both, Nigel. On the NHS, though, Rachel Reeves stated that they had recruited an extra 2,000 GPs, created an extra 5,000 GP appointments, and reduced the waiting list by 200,000, all of which I find really hard to believe. From what I can see, almost every appointment created seems to get cancelled and rebooked. So is there smoke and mirrors at play? We keep hearing about how many GPs are leaving work. So are the 2,000 GPs really extra or just backfill? I was wondering, says Nigel, if you've still got contact with your mole, George, and if they are able to clarify if any of these numbers are real. We are very much in contact with Planet Normal's beloved George, so it's a good idea, Nigel. I will ask. Love what you both do every week on Planet Normal, which I look forward to for my dose of sanity. P.S. In case you're curious, I'm a long-time Tory voter, but switched allegiance to Reform UK at the last election, still the only party speaking any sense, in my opinion.
And finally, this is from Christopher. Allison and Liam, you both do an amazing job. Thanks for providing insight, sanity, and doing so in an entertaining way. There's been continuous talk about creating an immigration threshold such that those allowed in will be net contributors. Unless I've missed it, the major parties haven't stated what constitutes a net contributor. Why would we set the visa immigration threshold unless we precluded people from benefits such as the NHS and welfare? If we exclude the NHS for those visiting, either long or short term, we need to ensure that visitors that need or want it can get medical care. We should either insist they use existing private healthcare services and or get the NHS to charge for any care they give. Something I understand that they can't do today, which means if you're visiting, there's no incentive to insure yourself before coming. As a result, we must have medical visitors, migrants to add to the economic migrants. Is this not all just common sense? If so, how do we find politicians and civil servants who will enact common sense? It has to be Planet Normal and our leaders, Liam for Chancellor, Allison for Health Minister. Thank you again for bringing weekly sanity from Christopher.
Christopher, I'm going to be the Minister for Deportations, love. So that's my job sorted out.
And on that bombshell, that's it from Planet Normal as we leave our sanctuary of sweet reason, our flying refuge of reason views. Email of the week, it's Alison's turn.
And it's to Dan the doctor. And let's hope, Dan, that you get a fantastic job in the country that paid for your medical training. So please send us an email and put mug winner in the subject, and a fantastic Planet Normal mug will wing its way to you.
And just to remind you again about a Planet Normal live event on Sunday, the 19th of October at 11 a.m. We'll be recording a special edition of Planet Normal at the Battle of Ideas at Church House in central London.
Tickets are going to be available through the festival website, battleofideas, all one word, .org.uk. And there is a Planet Normal discount code. Use the word PLANET when buying tickets and you will get a better deal. And I have to say, it's a weekend of stimulating conversation and debate, and polite, isn't it, Liam? Not people shouting like the Prime Minister, banding around horrible, divisive language. Very, very civilised debate. So please come along if you get the chance.
And always loads of youngsters at the Battle of Ideas. Youngsters from all parts of the political spectrum and none. It is great to see. If you've enjoyed this episode of Planet Normal, please subscribe, leave a review and rating wherever you listen. Thanks finally to our brilliant producers, Cass Ho, Louisa Wells, James Hodgson. Stay safe and in touch with us and with each other. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.